Hey everybody, got my engine and transmission out of the S10 at the moment. Had to replace the clutch, fix a few other couple things I didn't like about it, and I'm getting ready to go back in with it, and that's why I decided to go ahead and shoot a video here and try and do a much more in-depth walkthrough of what all had to be done. I guess I'll start here with the transmission itself. This is the S10 AR5 out of the 06 Solstice, the donor vehicle. And this transmission is kind of like the aluminum cousin of the Toyota's R154 transmission. So this is definitely related to the R series transmissions you find in Supras and also Toyota's line of pickups that have the V6 in it. So a lot of those parts are interchangeable. The clutch here, I'm using the stock Solstice clutch. I just replaced the flywheel, the concentric slave cylinder, and the clutch and pilot bearing and all that. I had to change all that out. Initially, when I got the vehicle trying to resurface the flywheel, there is no spec for the flywheel for the clutch. For the flywheel here. So then I asked the machine shop just to, take as much off of the disc as you do the kind of the upper area, because it is a two-step clutch. You have the clutch surface, and then you have the surface above it where the pressure plate actually bolts on. And you think if you take material from one and take material from another, and that material is the same or removed, then it should be equal to the same. Well, that's not the case. It actually ended up burning up the clutch. So everything's brand new. Just went ahead and replaced all of it. One mod I did do is I went ahead and upgraded to Honda Civic bolts for the pressure plate. Reason being is that I never had the GM ones that initially came with it. They're also a very odd thread in size. And these bolts are much stronger, much better. They're slightly larger threads, so I had to drill and tap the flywheel, but they're in there now and it's all good. In terms of the shifter for the transmission, how I got around that was this is a Toyota Tacoma shifter, a V6 Tacoma that had a 6-speed in it. This shifter here, I was able to just get it out of a junkyard. I called up a junkyard and they just sent it over to me. What they don't give you and what you do need when you're converting from the much longer Solstice clutch shifter arrangement is you need, of course, the shifter, but there's also a cup that goes down inside there. You can order that from Toyota. It's like 25 bucks, and you just change that out. You do have to take the tail shaft housing off to change that out, but you just change out the little rod there, it bolts up the same, and then the shifter plugs right in and gives you kind of a converted shifter there. In the S10, you have a live axle. That's not the same as the Solstice. Solstice, the axle is fixed in its location, it doesn't move, so the drive shaft is significantly different. The flange I found here is from a 2000 Isuzu Rodeo V6 two-wheel drive automatic. The flange, it's the same diameter as the seal, the spline is the same, it's just longer. So you will need to have a machine shop cut this down to the correct length, but once you do that, it will slip on, you can put the bolt on, and you'll have a flange that you can now bolt to. It gives you a Dana flange basically. So you can you can get into Dana U-joints, which is much more akin to a Chevrolet. So that's pretty much everything I think I came into with this setup here. One thing I will note is that this transmission, if you look at the mating surface for the shifter, it's actually clocked at a different angle than the top of the engine. And that's because the Solstice engine is actually clocked 10 degrees to the right. So the top of this would not be level once it's installed in the vehicle. This shifter should be level when it's installed, which is the case of what I have. So that's basically the transmission and the clutch and how I dealt with all that. So this here is the engine bay for the S10. Kind of show you what I had to do. To clear the cross member, that was a pretty tight fit, and I've actually had to notch the frame right there to get it to kind of clear out a little better. And then I had to build that little tower there for the biscuit mount. And aside from that, that's how I did that. And then over here, it's just a clamshell mount. This is for like a small block Chevy conversion. I used it and then hacked up the bracket for the small block and used that as the bracket for the side of my motor. And this is where I ended up mounting the newer ECU. And I'm leaving the old one right there. Aside from that, the firewall, this is the part where it gets very tight. It is right below that plate there. That plate's actually the mounting point for your gas pedal. And right below it, that's exactly where that radiator hose went. So you will definitely have to clearance that if you want your hose, or especially that cooler there. It's going to really get into the gas pedal. You really just don't have an option to keep that cooler on the newer 2.4s. Aside from that, I'm using the stock power steering rack, linkages, and you can even see here, this is why I opted to go to a rear sump pan, because this linkage and that frame definitely would just hit the pan. There's no way around it. Alright, now this is the one part about the swap that was very difficult and has given me a lot of challenges. Basically, the way the Solstice lower radiator hose works is that the thermostat housing is located back over here. It comes across the top of the bell housing, passes underneath behind the oil filter housing, which, on another note, if you're using, I think, a supercharged 2.4, actually at this location there is a antifreeze to oil cooler right here. That's going to be a huge problem. You're going to be right at the firewall. I've actually had to beat the firewall back quite a bit in this corner just to get this hose to clear. Originally I tried going up and over to the top and then back down. It created a lot of flow issues, and the temperature was never right in the vehicle, so it always just was kind of overcooling itself all the time. So I've opted to go back this way. I'm just using this hot rod chrome hose. I wish it wasn't chrome because I hate putting chrome parts on cars. But it's a really nice unit. It does go very far, and you can just bend it by hand. So much easier. But it just goes around and pops out beneath the alternator up front and hooks in. But yeah, that was a big problem, and you might want to watch out if you end up getting that 2.4 with the cooler attachment back here, because you're going to have to plug that off and use something else, or eliminate it altogether. I could have gone up and over the oil filter housing here, but at that point it would make an oil change pretty much impossible, so that's why I didn't do it. And that's about it. Yep. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about what I had to do with the accessory drive on the front of the engine. Basically, what you're going to have a problem with on the S10 is that the steering gearbox is right here, underneath where the alternator is right now. The power steering pump normally is located, and the Solstice is actually located on the passenger side down low. It is a smaller Toyota pump that is similar to what you might find in like a RAV4 or something like that. The problem with that one is that I don't think it has the volume displacement to sufficiently drive the steering system in the S10. That's why I didn't want to go with it. And two, you would have to notch the frame in order to clearance for that pump, because it actually sticks out pretty far down low on the other side down there. Now, the bracket I'm using here, this came from, I think it was a later model, like a 2012 Buick Regal, if I'm not mistaken, the one that carries the 2.4. This bracket actually extends everything out and allows you to bolt in a standard GM Type 2 Saginaw pump, which is the one that the S10 comes with. So this is the S10 power steering pump. There, it's preserved, it's the right pulley, everything in it. I had absolutely no problems with the steering system at all. It performs flawlessly. There are no problems at all. The alternator is right, of course, down here. It's fine. It has a lead that goes from the back of it to the starter, which is a little different from what the S10 had, because the alternator is on the other side on the S10. So you have an additional power cable that goes from the transmission there over to the, it goes from the alternator and then goes off to the power and distribution block under the battery. You don't need that lead anymore. You just come all the way around and then tie into the starter and then hop on over to the alternator and you're done. I just used the fusible link that came with the Solstice engine. Aside from that, another issue you're going to have with the pan especially is that right here on the front of the pan there is a boss. Originally it's the sump, basically it's the sump location. It's because it's a front sump in the Solstice. Well, you can't do that in the S10 because not only do you have the crossmember here, but you also have the steering linkage right in the way. You simply can't get around that unless you really want to go into some very complex stuff and try to use a power steering rack. Good luck if you can do it. It was significantly easier just to modify the pan. So this pan is now rear sump. I cut it up, made it, put it all together, kind of mocked it up, and then just took it down to a local place and had them weld it because I don't have the ability to weld aluminum. And that's about it for accessories.